Good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour at 5:30, we'll be chatting with Mark Morgan, former acting commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection. We'll get the latest with him on the threats, the ever-present threats now at our southern border. A lot of warnings about what's coming. Mark Morgan will discuss that with us. And you can talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, it was about 3 years ago, January 6, 2021. The Biden administration is still looking for more and more people to charge in order to destroy their lives, in order to fulfill one of the high holy days of the American left, January 6. And among the people they're charging are journalists, conservative journalists who committed no acts of violence whatsoever, who didn't disrupt any proceeding of Congress, who were there merely to cover the events of that day. Among those people is my next guest. Steve Baker is a contributor to The Blaze, and he just got some jarring news this week. Steve, thank you very much for joining us today, sir.
Hey, Vince. Thanks for having me.
Steve, I, of course, saw your tweet like so many others. You indicated that your attorney was contacted by the FBI this week to let him know that you are going to be charged by the Justice Department. Why? For what?
Well, that we don't know yet. We don't know what the charges are going to be because the FBI agent declined to tell my attorney what they are. And he said, as his excuse for not disclosing that, is that he himself won't know what they will be until the magistrate signs off on the warrant itself. But this has been an ongoing process for me for 2.5 years. I was first contacted by the FBI in July of 21, so just 6 months after January 6th. And then I was threatened with prosecution by a assistant U.S. attorney out of Philadelphia in November. This was after we consented to an FBI interview. And then after their initial threat, which took place the week before Thanksgiving in November of 21, we didn't hear from them again for 20 months. And then I got a grand jury subpoena for all my videos that I took on January 1st, or January 6th, rather. And all of those videos were then, you're going to about to hear some sounds of the streets of Washington, D.C. here.
That's okay. We're familiar with those sounds.
Yes, you are. And so the bottom line is that I got this grand jury subpoena for my videos, which was absurd on its face because we had already voluntarily offered them 20 months earlier to the FBI. I had nothing to hide personally in the videos. They were just the content that I had recorded, and then my videos were used and licensed out to various news agencies and documentaries all over the world. So it was not there was nothing to hide, but they chose to go forward with this grand jury subpoena charade. And so we complied, and we complied to the grand jury subpoena, and then we didn't hear from them again since August. And then all of a sudden, yesterday morning, I'm coming out of a couple of meetings at the Rayburn building that I was there working on with the stories that I'm developing right now here in D.C. And I get a text from my attorney saying, "You need to call me." And a text from your attorney says, "Please call," is never really a good thing. So
yeah,
it seems like what we learned yesterday.
It's a big deal. So take me back to January 6th of 2021. Mm-hmm. You, at the time, as I understand it, were an independent journalist. You were covering the events of the day. You followed the story where it went inside the Capitol building, but you did not commit any act of violence. Or you didn't steal any of Nancy Pelosi's office supplies, nothing like that, right?
No, as a matter of fact, the first thing that the FBI agents who interviewed me in October of 21 said to me was, "Thank you for doing no violence against law enforcement that day." So this is on the record when we go through the discovery process, should I eventually be charged, as they've threatened on Tuesday, that I have to self-surrender. And that should we eventually go to trial and we eventually start having to preparing and we go through this discovery process, I'll be able to acquire the audio of that interview. And I'll be able to say and show that that's exactly what they said to me. But they, look, they have me on 1,000 different cameras. They have me on hundreds of cameras inside the Capitol. They have me on, God knows how many cell phones and other journalists that were inside the building.
Yes.
I mean, look, Vince, there were 60 journalists that entered the Capitol from the outside. So these were not people that were embedded and that were covering the certification of the election. These weren't people that were already there. These were people that came through windows, came through doors, mainstream, independents, left, right. Myself, I'm a libertarian, and never been a Trump supporter. And so all of these individuals that came in are just as liable or guilty of whatever crimes that they're putting out there, but they're obviously not administrating this justice fairly or equally, because this is a selective prosecution situation, because I work for a right-wing news service.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there really are a bunch of other reporters not being charged here. And so you think, I mean, my belief based on this is it's obviously political targeting. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I know that it's political targeting because I've covered quite a few of these trials. As a matter of fact, I've covered some of the independent journalists that have been already convicted, and some of them who have been sentenced, and some who have already even served multiple months of prison terms for doing nothing more than doing their jobs. I always go back to one case. He was the very first individual arrested in Florida. His name is J.D. Rivera, out of the Pensacola area. He was the first January 6th arrest in the state of Florida, and he was there as a contractor working as a videographer, as a photojournalist. This is what he does for a living, what he's been doing for a living since he retired from the Marines. And he had his professional gear. He wasn't recording on a cell phone. He had all of his expensive pro gear there. And he followed and tracked Luke Mogelson from the New Yorker. They basically paralleled each other throughout the Capitol. And they recorded the same thing, many of the same exact events at the same places, inside the Senate, where the QAnon shaman was praying and doing his thing inside the Senate chamber. But JD was arrested and Luke Mogelson was not, because Luke Mogelson submitted his video and he submitted his story to the New Yorker, and the title of his story was Among the Insurrectionists. So with that title right there, he had his get out of jail free card, and unfortunately JD didn't have that going for him, and so consequently he got convicted in a bench trial and was then sentenced to 8 months in prison, of which he served 7 months for doing nothing more than doing what he was contracted and paid and did for a living.
So, I mean, obviously you're going to have to discuss all this with your attorney, so you may not have an answer to this just yet, but that sounds to me, just as a civilian, like selective prosecution, where you're being attacked by your government. They're clearly not going after other people who met the same exact standards as you did, and they're doing it on a political basis. If the government goes after you, do you plan on raising this as a defense?
Well, we plan on hitting it hard, but more importantly, we plan on hitting it hard in advance. We're going to try this case in the court of public opinion on that basis, because, Vince, I'm telling you, I've covered the independent journalist cases so far, and not one of them has been allowed to present the selective prosecution argument. In fact, there's a kid out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Stephen Horn. He was a young independent journalist. He was only 22 at the time. He's 25 now. He had acquired and been doing journalism. He had acquired press passes and press badges for various events since he was 16 years old. He came up here as an independent to cover this event. He followed the story where the story went. No violence, no insurrection-y kind of things in his behavior whatsoever. And this kid was convicted on the 4 basic misdemeanors. He decided to go to trial rather than taking a plea deal. He was not allowed to show the jury all of the press badges that he had acquired since he was 16 years old.
Yes. But it also strikes me that you really, as much as I think that does add weight to your argument, you shouldn't have to demonstrate that you have a long-standing career as a journalist in order to be able to make a case that you are entitled to a free press, to be considered part of the free press. Because, any citizen can conduct an act of journalism for the benefit of the public. And, there are people who capture these things who specifically are in there in an independent capacity, who want to capture this and share it with the public, and they should be respected as exercising their rights.
Well, that's absolutely correct. But, there have been some individuals who suddenly became a journalist that day. And I agree with your argument that anybody should be able to become an instant citizen journalist if what they've captured and what they've learned and which they are covering is of public interest and public consumption is something that people want to see and want to hear about. But there were people that said, hey, I'm doing my Facebook live stream and I became a journalist that moment. I understand the weakness of that argument, but the Department of Justice are bringing charges against people with a background and track. I have a 25-year history prior to January 6th of being a writer. I had many years of being an investigator. And then as the investigative journalism side of things started happening more frequently as a result of the COVID lockdowns, I started exercising that muscle. And then I decided to go to D.C. to see what was happening at that event. That, again, me not being a Trump supporter, I was there out of my curiosity because he said things were going to be wild. And he also had indicated that maybe he was going to release some sort of information about this alleged stolen election, and I wanted to be there to interview people.
Of course, it was one of the most inherently newsworthy events in the country. If you're a journalist, you should want to be there to see what was going down.
So you would expect, if you have hundreds of thousands of people, obviously from the right side of the political aisle, you're going to expect that their journalists are going to be there covering that. And then, obviously, because it's in D.C., you're going to still have the mainstream media Mockingbird crowd there as well.
Yeah.
They're going to be covering their side of the things. But that's exactly what's happening in this process. Is if you were submitting your stories to the right publication or the right media source, and you were comporting your stories to the preferred narrative, then you're not getting charged. But they're only being charged from the other side of the political spectrum.
So I'm curious how much support you're getting, Steve. As you pointed out, you're ready to go. I mean, this is why you're talking to me today. You want to make sure that the public knows about this and can assess it. Are you finding that that people are supporting you? Is your employer, are the Blaze supporting you? What does this look like? What kind of army do you have with you as you go into this trial, to this challenge?
I'll tell you. Glenn Beck this morning had me on the program this morning, and through the entire weight of his media empire behind me, my editor-in-chief, he wrote an op-ed for the Blaze Media this afternoon, and through the weight of the company behind me. So I'm very blessed, and
that's excellent.
I'm blown away. I mean, these guys got behind me with everything. And then, the outpouring of support that I've had elsewhere throughout, social media and friends and family have just been phenomenal. Look, I've had over 2 years to emotionally prepare for the inevitability of this day, but obviously always hoping that it wouldn't come. Always praying every morning, please, Lord, let this cup pass from me.
Yes.
But you know what? If I've got to go through it and I've got to carry the torch on a grand First Amendment fight here, well, then that's what I'm going to do.
Well, God bless you for it. And I really do hope people come out and support you in the face of this. This is explicit injustice, and they just don't stop. It's insatiable. There's Matthew Graves and Joe Biden, Merrick Garland. They want to really demonize anything that doesn't fall in line, and they're using the Justice Department to do it. It's as grotesque as anything we've seen in our lifetimes. And right now, Steve Baker, it seems like you're bearing the brunt of it. We'll stay in touch with you, Steve, as long as you can chat with us about it. We'll be grateful to have you with us.
Absolutely, Vince. We're looking toward. I would invite everyone to go look me up on the Blaze. Look me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at TPC4USA. That's TPC, the number 4 USA. And follow our stories on the Capitol Police. We have done the most revelatory stories of corruption and perjury in these January 6th trials of any media organization, and that's been our work. In fact, I've been for the entire week here at the Capitol working on the CCTV room of that renowned 41,000 hours worth of video. That's where me and my Blaze crew has been all week this week.
Well, in case you're wondering why they're targeting Steve Baker. Steve, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time today, sir. All right, let's go to the phones. We've got Carter calling in from Bethesda now, line 2. Carter, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, what's going on, buddy? Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to let you know, that last caller you had on, I think it was Steve Baker from the Blaze, right? The guest.
Yeah.
His story is exactly like my story. I've done stints at OAN and Real America's Voice. I go online by Carter Rocks, kind of a play off the neighborhood, right? So that day, I was there as well, except I was on the White House lawn, and I was credentialed as a journalist to be there. Now, in this town, I've been credentialed at the Dome probably 10 times. I've done the State of the Union address when I was a stage manager at CNN. Now, that day, when I left the White House, I had a bad feeling. I just had this really ominous feeling. And, you know, I was exhausted from Freedom Plaza the night before. I was there with a bunch of different guys, Roger Stone, Alex Jones, Kosovic, a bunch of them.
Right.
So anyway, what happened was my life could have been completely destroyed if all I had done was kept walking straight down Pennsylvania Avenue, gone all the way to the Capitol, touched the grass, expressed my support for Donald Trump, gotten on the Metro at Union Station, and gone home. The FBI would have come to my house.
Yes.
They would have taken everything, all my equipment. It doesn't also hurt that, I've interviewed Stuart Rhodes 3 times. How do they not know about me? I just assume they're surveilling me. That's why.
Right. Yeah, that would be a safe assumption, I would think, Carter. I mean, given that they seem to be they've been obtaining phone data from all the major cell phone companies, tracking everybody, even traveling into the D.C. region. They have air marshals following people as a result of them being in the region around the date of January 6th. They know about you, Carter. They know about you, bud.
I had a meeting where I went to a press conference with some congressmen, and James O'Keefe was there, Cheryl Atkinson. She said they tried to put child porn on her husband's computer. James O'Keefe's telling me that they spied on him, and they can spy on your phone even if it's not on. I switched to Patriot Mobile. Follow CarterRocks.com.
Carter, thanks for the call. This is I mean, look, Steve, you mentioned saying even expressing support for Donald Trump. It sounds like Steve didn't express anything. He just went and covered the events of January 6th, and they're still charging him because he works for conservative media and he's been exposing all of this. And so for that, he's being punished by our government. We'll keep on these stories. Thanks for that call, Carter. Thanks for Steve's interview. Ahead, we're going to talk to Mark Morgan about what's happening on our border, new concerns about IED attacks on the border. Stay with us. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Talk about the border here in a moment. First, I want to take a phone call. I've got Jason calling in from Kensington now on line 3. Jason, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
Hey, g'day, Vince. How you going, mate?
I'm all right, Jason. How you doing?
Good. It's Friday afternoon. Can't be better. Just look at these universities, these Ivy League schools, and just how much money and influence they have over the kids now. I mean, what they should start teaching with for some of these advanced degrees these kids get is options, and have an options major where they have the option to leave the country if they want to, if they hate it so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that it's just so hard to believe that they get such a freedom of choice to say whatever they want to say, and yet they still hate this country so much. It's amazing.
Isn't it interesting? Yeah, it's weird. Like, they have this freedom to say whatever they want, and yet they all say the same stuff, right? They're all saying, they're all reading from the same sheet of music. They hate the country. They resent it. I saw some numbers today, like dramatic numbers of young people, unfortunately, our youngest generation, who think that your skin color dictates your future and that white people are oppressive. We're looking at massive numbers of children who've been radicalized. It's very much like kind of the Chinese Cultural Revolution right here in the United States.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary because, you know, these are the kids that are going to become the adults that'll take care of people like us when we get older. I mean, you can imagine what they're going to do. They're probably just going to throw us in a bloody cave somewhere and, throw the key away. I mean, there's no empathy. There's no like for their country, which would translate into their dislike for their other citizens. You know, it's amazing.
And it's not hyperbole when you say that they're going to try and throw us in prison. In fact, you're looking at some people already being thrown in prison for having different politics. Chris Rufo is who tweeted this today. It was an image from a Harvard Harris poll. It showed that 79% of Americans between the ages of 18 and 24 believe the following: white people are oppressors, and that this ideology should be, quote, favored today at universities and for employment. So that should be the animating feature, that to be white is to be oppressive. I mean, this is racial bigotry built into our system, and young, impressionable people are buying into it. And I saw, Jason, last point here on this for us. I saw Peggy Noonan wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed about this week, and she pointed out that when you're a student, essential to that word is you're supposed to study. Your job at school is to ingest information, to be given information, and instead you're watching it as all these students who are coming out, whatever they're ingesting is propaganda, and whatever they're regurgitating, they're the most entitled group of people you've ever encountered. They're like barking at you about how you don't understand the world, Jason in Kensington, and how you have to listen to them. They're in charge now.
Yeah, and the thing is too, the very same people that produce next to nothing compared to the people who help them get through this world. It's amazing because along with them and the federal government, they produce absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then when they come out of Harvard, guess what they do? They become the mayor of Boston, Massachusetts, where they organize. I'm not even lying. Michelle Wu, the mayor of Boston, Massachusetts, is a Harvard graduate, and now she's organizing parties where white people are not allowed. Whites not allowed Christmas parties by the Boston mayor right now. So it's just. That's what happens. That's who they're churning out. Jason, thank you very much for the call. I really appreciate that as always. Have a great weekend. Let me turn now to the border if I can. We've got a report about what's going on our border. I'll let Fox News' Bill Hammer voice this for us. Here's what he had to say.
U.S. officials are warning agents to watch out for IEDs, improvised explosive devices. This now, according to an internal memo obtained by Fox Business, says the Mexican military seized 10 explosives at the border. The memo reads in part, quote, agents should exercise extreme caution and should report any possible armed subjects approaching the border with possible explosive devices.
All right, so Biden's policies now putting at risk of terror attacks involving IEDs. An overseas threat comes to America. Joining us now to discuss, Mark Morgan is here. He's a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation and the former acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection under President Trump. Sir, great to have you back with us.
Vince, thanks for having me as always.
When I hear IED, I think of Afghanistan, I think of Iraq, I think of our troops stepping on mines or driving over these things and them detonating and maiming and killing our guys. Is that what we're talking about here?
We don't know yet, Vince, to be honest. There's still a lot about this. We don't know exactly what the intended use of the IEDs. But generally, you're spot on here, because the signal should be sending is just how powerful, how sophisticated that the cartels are. But let's keep in mind that the use of IEDs, the use of other what you would think of as wartime implements, it's not the first time, right? I mean, look, we fought on the island. We know that we had Sicarios that were coming across. We uncovered, handmade hand grenades. Let's not forget, almost 20 years ago, 2006, the warring factions of different cartels we had in Juarez that ended up killing thousands of people. So it's not necessarily new that they use implements of war. But right. I believe now they're becoming more emboldening, and what they should tell people at a minimum that they're warring against each other because they're vying for control over these very lucrative human and drug smuggling routes.
Well, the other piece is that the nature of this illegal immigration has changed a lot over the past decade. It used to be that we had all this illegal migration from Mexico, and then subsequently it was from Central America, and now it's from every hellhole on earth. And so if all the hellholes are emptying their populations into the United States, you have to imagine that some people actually have it out for us.
Yeah, Vince, look, I couldn't have said it better myself. And this is the point where I get really frustrated because look, and I get it. I don't want to be too harsh on the vast Americans here. I get it. They're working hard, putting food on the table, taking care of their family. But there's a lot of people that just fundamentally don't understand. And some of it's driven because of their blind, because of their ideology and their politics. But what you said is extremely correct. And people need to wake up. What's happening at our border is not about immigration. What's happening is about border security, which is synonymous with national security. That's what you're seeing. In the past 35 months, we've encountered individuals from over 180 different countries. Many of those countries we know sponsor, facilitate, and harbor terrorism. Many of those countries we know hate this country. Yet in the past 35 months, we've had over 8 million total nationwide encounters, and we're over close to 1.8 million known gotaways. I mean, Vince, look, I could keep going on with the stats. In the past 35 months, we've encountered over 285 individuals on the FBI's terror screening database. We've encountered tens of thousands. Vince, tens of thousands, what we call special interest aliens, again, come from countries that we know sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism. The question is, how many among them are there with respect to the 1.8 million known gotaways?
It's crazy. And I should point out, there's also social costs here too. The national security thing is the first and foremost. But if you're letting in 10 million people over the course of 3 years into your country, and you don't know who they are, and they're filling every population in the country at taxpayer expense, the effect on communities is immense. I mean, just ask Martha's Vineyard. They deported everybody right away when they got there. But for the rest of us, we don't have that luxury. And what that does is it decreases social trust inside of neighborhoods and communities. You're less likely to let your kid jump on their bicycle and ride around the neighborhood. And then they become sedentary, and then the military can't find anybody who's even within the weight class in order to make it in. So you have this massive problem that is only getting worse and worse by not enforcing our borders.
That's exactly right. And this is why we keep saying the results of open borders are vast and complex. The solutions are not, right? And that's what's so frustrating. We know how to secure a border. We did it under the Trump administration, and every single day our border was getting more secure. It's not complicated. If you actually de-incentivize those coming in illegally, shocker, they stop coming. And they stop coming by the millions. We get more resources back on the front lines of our nation's border. We take operational control back from the cartels, and our borders more secure physically. That's on the front end. But on the back end, the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Chairman Mark Green, he just released the fourth in a series of 5 reports that he's taken a look at Secretary Mayorkas' failure. And he talks about what you're talking about. It costs taxpayers $500 billion in a variety of ways. Think about that, Vince. $500 billion on the backs of U.S. taxpayers. And what does this administration want in their budget proposal right now? It's not money to actually go to border security. It's not meaningful border security legislation. They just want more money to process and release faster with this, which is just going to beget more illegal immigration and cause the problem to get worse.
So just to give you a sense of how bad this is, normally it's very difficult to overcome partisan differences and have reason breakthrough for some of these Democrats. But Democrat Governor Katie Hobbs of Arizona today announced that she is deploying the National Guard to the border because she can't get help from the Biden administration. She's been begging them for help. They're not giving her any. So she's now, a Democrat governor, now deploying the National Guard to assist in more efforts on the border there. I mean, doesn't that kind of tell you everything, Mark Morgan?
It does. And look, I always approach this as a glass half full. So while I think that's a good move for the National Guard, but unfortunately with the Democrats, and there's a couple of good ones like Henry Cuellar that's out there, but they fall short of what they should be doing. And this is what I mean. They fall short of actually putting this on the backs of the Biden administration and calling not just for more money that's just going to help shuttle them faster into other areas, but actually that's going to stop the policies they have in place to actually reverse course to de-incentivize illegal aliens from coming. That's what they're falling short on. But here's another entity that's falling short on that right now. Republicans. Vince, and I know I've heard you talk about this, you do a great job. H.R. 2 is the strongest piece of border security legislation that's ever been passed in a single chambers at the United States Congress. And all but one Republican senator voted for it. There's the plan. They all voted for the plan. And now when we have a chance, and they've got a fighting chance to actually make this administration reverse course, what do we have right now? the Republican senators that are negotiating with themselves to actually water down HR2? When did it become okay to compromise with our border security?
No, but well, you see, Mark Morgan, obviously the much more urgent threat is Ukraine and Russia and Vladimir Putin. That's where we need to be spending all of our money. Border,
exactly.
Like the White House's position right now on this, to be crystal clear, and you mentioned Republicans watering it down, and shame on them for doing that. But the White House's position here is like, how dare Republicans hold Ukraine funding hostage for American concerns? And I'm listening to this going, this is insane to me.
Vince, you're absolutely right. And here's another thing, though. Again, the Democrats are kicking the Republicans' butt on this sense, and that's the narrative, right? Republicans, part of the fear is they're going to get saddled with if the government shuts down, it's the Republicans' fault. Well, why don't they own the true narrative and reverse it? And we should be calling out the Democrats. Why would you allow our government to shut down to keep our borders open, right? That's just another way of saying exactly what you just said. That's exactly right. There is no reason why Republicans should own this. There is no reason why Republicans should compromise on securing our nation's border. Again, I'd like anyone to look in the face of an American citizen that died at the hands of illegal aliens, or a mother that buried her 2 sons because he died from fentanyl, or the national security threat. Tell me, which one of those areas are we going to compromise with respect to securing our nation's border?
Yeah, it's just really brutal what's going on right now. You know, I want to play some audio for you real quick. This is Admiral John Kirby at the White House, and I want to get your impression of if you've heard this audio before, what kind of spit take you did when he said this.
As the president said, he's all about border security.
This 9 days ago, John Kirby said that Joe Biden is, quote, all about border security. Has that been your experience, Mark Morgan?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right? It's just another bastion of truth coming out of the White House podium, right? First of all, let's be honest here. John Kirby does a pretty good job of being a spokesman, but here's what he's not good at: border security. He doesn't know the first thing about border security. I don't think he's ever been down to the border. I don't think he's ever actually talked to a Border Patrol agent. So forgive me if anything that he says with respect to the border is of no moment to me. He's just parodying a talking point that's been put in front of him. But to suggest that in 35 months, we've had over 8 million total nationwide encounters from 180 different countries. We've had almost 1.8 million known gotaways, which they've said is underreported by 20%. So I don't like to do public math, but that's well in excess of 2 million. Just those stats alone, for anyone to say that anyone in this administration is serious about border security, they're simply lying to the American people, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Let me ask one more hopeful question. Should Biden be thrown out of office and somebody who actually wants to secure our border takes over, like Trump again, will it be possible to reverse the damage here? And that includes deporting people who should not be here. Is that achievable?
It is, and here's why I say this. And this is the question, though, Vince. It's a very good question. And here's why I'm so quick to say yes. And it's not, hyperbolic, but I'm saying it's to get, Trump back in, is that first we have to stop the bleeding on the front end, right? So if we're going to have any hope to address what's already here, we have to stop the bleeding, and we know how to do that. Again, you literally pull off the Trump-era playbook off the shelf, dust it off, implement it. On day 1, you declare a national emergency. On day 2, you reinstate the remain in Mexico. On day 3, you reinstate the asylum cooperative agreements. And on day 1, you also simultaneously start rebuilding the wall. And on day 2, you also allow ICE to actually do their job. You remove the restrictions so they can start enforcing interior enforcement removal. And here's what I would say about the interior enforcement removal. We have to approach it from a whole of government approach, and you start one at a time. And I mean that. And I think, though, when I say the whole of government approach, I'll steal a line from Tom Holman, is we're going to have to put together one of the largest removal and deportation operations that this country has ever seen. Because if we don't send a message, 1, that we're going to stop you at the border, and 2, if somehow you make it past this, we're going to remove you. It has to be both of those if we're going to be successful.
We just need bold American leadership that respects the Constitution and secures our borders. It's like the most obvious thing ever. And God willing, it comes to pass. Thank you very much, Mark Morgan, for all of your expertise, wisdom, and your time today. Really appreciate that, as always, sir. All right, let's take a phone call. I've got Mike in Silver Spring on line 2. Mike, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, Vince.
Hey, Mike, what's on your mind, sir?
I work in Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of Latino guys. And one day there was a guy who was visibly upset because he needed to wire money home to his mother. And I said, look, your mom's going to understand that it's snowing and you can't make it to Western Union. And he says, no, you don't understand. When I came into the country, the cartel got my contact information and knows where my mother lives. And if I don't send money home every month, they're going to kill her.
Because
like,
so they're extorting him for money,
yeah.
and so he has to send some amount to them and his mother. Is that the idea?
The cartel takes it all.
The cartel takes it. It's crazy. I mean, it's just the craziest thing what we're enabling here. Mike, thank you for that. It's unbelievable, and it's real. You know, the cartels are terrorist organizations. They're kidnapping people, extorting, raping, torturing. This is all happening south of our border, and it's happening to people from all across the planet. And the Biden administration enables it with each passing day with your tax dollars. So that's why we try and cover it here aggressively, because something has to change. It really does. The great one, Mark Levin, is up next here on WMAL.